What's going on? Next project on my 1992 Dodge W250 is to replace the exhaust housing of the turbo with a smaller exhaust housing. On the 92 Dodges, they put on 21 centimeter exhaust housings on the backside of the turbo, and I think in 91 and 93 they put in I think it was 19 centimeter exhaust housing. And I got a good deal on a BD 16 centimeter exhaust housing that was never installed. I got it for a guy on Kijiji. So we're gonna see if we can get the old turbo off. It's a H1c turbo, and replace the exhaust housing with this one. Whole purpose of this is to reduce turbo lag in the turbo. So when you're stepping into it, it'll usually take a few seconds for it to kick in and get your power. So hopefully with this exhaust housing, if you're stepping into it, you'll get your power right away and your throttle response will be right there. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is pull off the air intake and then maybe the exhaust, so we can get at all the bolts to get off the exhaust housing. Right, so the oil inlet feed's going to need to come off, and there's also an oil drain on the bottom, 2 bolts that's going to need to come off. That's this long tube that runs down there, and then of course the exhaust has to come off, and then from the turbine housing, this is going to have to come off as well. And on here, these are studs that come off of the exhaust manifold with nuts on them. We already broke one loose, and we're going to get the rest loose now. Right, just managed to get the turbo out. 2 of the studs came with the nuts close towards the front. Here's what I was talking about on the bottom. That's the oil drain. The oil inlet on the top took off. Everything else came out alright-ish. Here's the turbo. Something to do and check on your turbo is to make sure you don't have any shaft play in your impeller. Wiggle it up and down, left to right. This one seems good to go. Here's the exhaust housing, and you can see on the exhaust housing the number 21. That's where it says that's the size of the exhaust housing. 21 centimeters. So on the back side of the exhaust housing, there's 4 bolts and 2 plates which hold the exhaust housing onto the impeller housing. So you got to get those plates off first, and then we can whack off the exhaust housing. Alright, so we've got both those plates off now. As you can see, right in there, where those 2 lips meet, that's where the exhaust housing comes off. And as you can see, it looks like it's rusted on pretty well after 25 years. So we're going to try our best to get it off. Okay, so we managed to break loose the exhaust housing on the turbo. At first we tried the rubber mallet, and that didn't work, and then we moved to the 4-pound chop hammer, and that didn't work. So then we broke out the heat and heated up the exhaust housing just around the outside so it could break loose maybe a little bit from the inside. And then from there we used, this is a steel pin with a 4-pound chop hammer, and we just banged on each side and broke it loose. And now, pull that off. We saw it came loose a little bit. And now it just came right out. And that probably took maybe 45 minutes overall just to get that off. Here's a quick size comparison between the old exhaust housing and the new exhaust housing. 16 centimeter on the right and 21 centimeter on the left. Okay, so just about to put the new exhaust housing on the turbo. For placement, we know that it's coming off the exhaust manifold here, and then the oil outlet of the compressor housing's at the bottom in relation to where that sits. So it's roughly around there. We're gonna put it on, and then if it's off by a little bit, we can always tap it and rotate it a little bit before we put down the hold down clamps. After dry fitting it on the truck, we put the exhaust housing on first, and then knowing that the oil inlet points straight up, we've lined up this with the bolt hole on the exhaust housing, and that's where our placement's going to be when we put that on. Okay, so we put the exhaust housing on now by just driving down these bolts with the plates on, making sure that the shaft still spins while driving it on, so you're putting it on evenly. Okay, a quick tip here. We already tried to put it on the truck once and it wasn't aligning correctly position-wise. So what we're going to do this time is put it on loosely, but have the brackets on there, the backing plates on, with the nuts snug. So if we need to rotate it, we can easily rotate it. Then once everything's on and connected, then we'll tighten these, which will then press the exhaust housing back on here.
Okay, we've got everything buttoned up here. That worked well, leaving this loose to adjust the final position of that, so we could get this drain tube lined up first. Once that was in position, everything is tightened up, so the exhaust is on. Got the air cleaner intake hooked up. All the manifold bolts are tight. Not sure what the torque specs are. We torqued them to as tight as we could get them with the wrench. Time for a test drive.